Good morning, Phoenix class, and welcome to today's maths lesson. I can convert fractions to decimals. This is our second lesson on this. So what have we done so far? We've learned to convert decimals to fractions with denominators of 10, 100 and 1,000, and then we've reminded ourselves how we can simplify those. We've also had a go at converting fractions with denominators of 10, 100 and 1,000 to decimals, as well as if we have a fraction with a different denominator, finding an equivalent fraction with 10, 100 or 1,000 as its denominator, and then converting that to its decimal. So let's do a little bit of a recap here, which we're going to be adding the missing symbols, so greater than, less than, or equal to. If we have a quick look at the first one together, we've got a decimal of 1.5 and a fraction of 1 1/5. So if we think about our place value grid, we can quickly draw one of those. Let's put our ones in here and our tenths are there. Don't forget to put your decimal point in as well. So we can put 1 and a 5 there, 1.5. So we know that the 5 is in our tenths column. So our 1, that's our 1 ones, and then our 5 we can write as 5 tenths. But we also know that we're comparing it to a number which has a denominator of 5. And we can only compare fractions, can't we, if they've got the same denominator. So we need to make our 1 1/5 into 1 and something over 10, because then we're going to be able to compare it. Now, what do we do to 5 to get to 10? Yeah, we're going to times that by 2. And we all know what we do to the denominator, we do to the numerator. So 1 times 2 is 2. Now we can compare 1 and 5 tenths to 1 and 2 tenths. So therefore we can say that 1.5 is greater than 1 and 1/5. I'll let you do the rest of those yourself. The answers are on the next slide. So our first problem today. What decimal number is the arrow pointing at? So we've got a number line here, as you can see. But the first thing I've got to work out is what our number line goes up in. So let's just count them. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've got eight sections, which means our number line goes up in eighths. So if we're going to write that as a fraction, we would have 8 as our denominator. So let's see how far that arrow is. So this one here, that's going to be 1/8. So that one, the next one will be 2/8. So what's the arrow pointing at? Yep, you're quite right. It's 3/8. But they want this as a decimal number. So there's a couple of ways that we could do this. Let's have a look at this first method. So this in method 1, it's asking us to think about fractions for quarters. Well, we know that 1/4 is the same as 0.25. We were doing that yesterday. That's one of the ones that hopefully eventually you will just remember. Just like you know that a half is the same as 0.5 and 3/4 is the same as 0.75. Now, if we split every quarter into 2, that means we are splitting them into eighths. So what is the equivalent decimal to 1/8? Well, if 2/8 equals 0.25, if we halve that, we're going to find out what the decimal is halfway, which is this one here. And we can see that that is 0.125. Therefore, halfway between this one and this one is going to be 0.25 plus 0.125, which is going to give me 0.375. And that as a fraction, we can say that 3/8 is also equivalent to 375 thousandths. There is another way that we can do that though. Now I want you to have a look at method 2. So 3/8 can also be written as a division. Now, we have met this before. Do you remember back when we were doing division and I asked you to write the remainder as a remainder, R something, as a decimal and as a fraction? So when you were doing that, you made the divisor, the number you're dividing by, into your denominator, and your remainder was your numerator. We're going to use the same theory today. So with 3/8, your 8 is your divisor. Your 3 is the number that you are dividing. So your 3 is called your dividend. Dividend is the number you're dividing. The divisor is the number that you are dividing by. So 3 divided by 8. Let's have a go at that. I'm going to just rub out this bit so it doesn't get in the way. And then let's put that onto pen. So we've got, how many lots of 8 can we get from 3? Well, we can't get any lots of 8, can we? So that's going to be 0. But we're going to carry the 3 over. We could do this as long division, or we can do it as short division, as we've got shown here. So now we want to think of our 8 times table again. How many lots of 8 can we get from 30? So let's think about our 8 times table. We've got 8, 16, 24, 32. Well, 32 is too much, so 24. So that then is 3 times, and 30, take away 24, gives us a remainder of 6, which we carry over to the next 0. I'm having to put a 0 in because, as you can see, I've run out of digits. So now I want to do 60 divided by 8. How many lots of 8 are there in 60? Well, I know that 7 times 8 is 56. So it goes 7 times, and the remainder 60, take away 56, gives me 4. Again, I've run out of digits, so I'm just putting a 0 in as a placeholder. So now I've got 40 thousandths. So this time, I'm now going to do, how many lots of 8 can I get from 40? And that's going to be 5. 5 times 8 is 40, so there is no remainder. So what did I do? I did 3/8, so the numerator divided by the denominator, 3 divided by 8 equals 0.375. So this time I could use this bottom stem sentence. I know that 3/8 is equivalent to 0. Am I going to fit this in? 0.375, because I divided the numerator by the denominator to calculate the decimal. Okay, so now it's asking us to label all the decimals on the number line. So what do we already know? Well, we know that this is half. What's half as a decimal? 0.5. So therefore, this must be a quarter. Can you remember what that is? 0.25. So if a quarter is 0.25, we can work out 3/4, can't we? This is another one that I'm hoping eventually you will just remember. So 3/4 is 0.5 plus 0.25, which will give us 0.75. So here we know. We also worked out, to work out the last question, that each jump goes up in 0.125. So because of that, we can then find out all the others. This was our 3/8 equivalent, wasn't it? So we can find out this one by adding 0.125 to 0.5. And then we can do the same with this one. Just make sure you remember to line up your decimal points. Let me do one of those for you. So we've got 0.75. And we want to know what the last one is. So we're going to add on 0.125. What do you notice? You will notice that our bottom number has less digits in it than our top number. That's not good. So what do we need to do to help us to make sure we've got the same number of digits? Yeah, we need to add a 0. So now we can start adding. 0 plus 5 is going to be 5. 5 plus 2 is 7. 7 plus 1 is 8. Because we are adding, our decimal point is just lined up underneath. 0 plus 0, that's going to give us a 0. So there you can see we've worked out all the numbers on the number line. In this question, Danny is trying to convert 1/3 to a decimal. Which of these is the correct way to start the division? Complete the correct division. Now, can you remember? Let's go to the very end of our STEM sentence before we fill in the gaps. I divide the numerator by the denominator to calculate the decimal. So what is our numerator? Our numerator here is 1. What is our denominator? Our denominator is 3. Can you remember those other two words I mentioned at the beginning of the PowerPoint? Divisor and dividend. So 3 is the divisor. That is what we are dividing by. There we go. And 1 is our dividend. That's the number that we are going to divide. So actually, that one, Danny has done wrong, hasn't he? So let me just rub out what we've done here. And let's have a go at finishing this calculation. So how many lots of 3 can we get from 1? We can't get any. So we have carried our 1 and exchanged it for, so we've got 10/10. So how many lots of 3 can we get from 10? Well, we know our 3 times table, 3, 6, 9. So that's 3 lots. 10 take away 9 is 1. So our remainder is 1. I've run out of digits, so I'm going to have to put a 0 in again. What do you notice? I've got 10 again. All right, so let's do it again. How many lots of 3 can I get from 10? 3, 6, 9, so that's 3. What's my remainder? 10 take away 9 is still 1. I could carry on and we could go on forever. But instead, we are going to say that this is recurring. So it's not our answer, 1/3 as a decimal, or 1 divided by 3, is approximately equal to 0.33, or we could say it's equal to 0.33 recurring. And to show it's recurring, you put a full stop on the top of your last digit. Question 2. Write each of these calculations as a fraction and as a decimal. So again, look down here at our STEM centres. I divide the numerator by the denominator. So if I'm dividing by the denominator, that means this is 3 divided by 2. So our denominator has to be 2. Well, if our denominator is 2, then our numerator has to be 3. Could I write that in any other way, still as a fraction? I could, couldn't I? I could write it as 1 1/2. But I also need it as a decimal. So let's do this one together. We're going to need a bus stop. What number am I dividing by? I'm dividing by my denominator, which is 2. That's my divisor, and my dividend is 3. I'm going to put my decimal point in there, ready, lined up. So how many lots of 2 can I get from 3? Well, I know I can get 1 lot, and 1 times 2 is 2. So 3 take away 2 gives me a remainder of 1. I'm going to carry my 1. I've run out of digits, so I'm going to put a 0 in as my placeholder. So now I'm being asked, how many lots of 2 can I make from 10? So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That's 5 lots. So my answer as a decimal is 1.5. I'm going to let you have a go at the rest of those. Into our practice book. So you need to decide when you're working through your practice book, which is the best and easiest way to convert from fractions to decimals. Is it a nice denominator that can be easily changed, or finding an equivalent fraction with 10, 100 or 1,000? Or is it one where you're going to have to use your division skills? Let's have a look at question 1. If we count how many squares we've got along there, you'll find that we've got 10 squares. And up here, we've got 5 squares. So in total, we're going to have 50 squares. How many are coloured in? We can count all of those. We've got 8 rows and we've got 5 that way. So 8 times 5 is going to be 40. So that gives us a fraction over 50. So what's going to be easiest? Dividing 40 by 50, or finding an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100? I think it's going to be that way, isn't it? What do we times 50 by to get to 100? We're going to times it by 2. So what we do to the denominator, we do to the numerator. So 40 times 2, 4 times 2 is 8. And then we pop our 0 back on. So we can say that the fraction is 80 hundredths. So therefore, I need a 0 in my hundredths column. I'm going to have an 8 in my tenths column. I'm going to put my decimal point in, and I'm going to have a 0 in my ones column. And there we have our decimal. I'm going to let you do the other 2 of that section as well. So the first thing we've got to do with question 2 is decide on how many our whole 1 is going up in. How many little lines are there? Well, we can count them all and we can see that it's going up in 20ths. So let's have a look at A. So A is the first one in, so it is going to be 1/20th. Now, again, am I going to find an equivalent fraction or am I going to do division? Well, I actually know that 20 times 5 is 100. So I'm going to find an equivalent fraction over 100. So if I times 20 by 5 to get to 100, that means I'm also going to times 1 by 5 to get to 100. So now I've got 5 hundredths. So when I'm writing, remember you can draw your place value chart if that helped you. I know that my 5 goes in my hundredths column. I'm going to have a 0 as a placeholder in my tenths column. I'm going to have my decimal point, and then I'm going to have a 0 there. You can have a go at all the rest of those. Remember, when you're writing it as your fraction, you might want to simplify it as well. On the next question, again, the first thing to think about is, what does our scale go up in? Look, our top number is 4. So if we go halfway, that's going to be 2 there. And if we find halfway there, that's going to be 1. That should help you work out the scale. Question 3 is asking you to find equivalent fractions and then converting those to decimals. So we might need to do some division on these ones, just like we did earlier. Question 4, using short division. Remember, your denominator becomes your divisor, the number that you are dividing by. Then finally, question 5, convert these fractions to decimals in the most appropriate way. So that is your choice, whether you can convert them to an equivalent fraction or whether you divide. If you fancy more practice, you've got some there. You're either going to do, or you'll do the challenges, depending how you got on. And then finally, do your reflection. Explain how to use decimals to compare 5/8 and 55 hundredths. And that's it. Have fun.